So let's get going. Maybe we start with well, I will introduce all of ourselves. So on the call, you have most of the development team of We Wrote, which I don't know if you know, but it's one of the up and coming startup scale up from Italy. We are in the travel business, like GetYourGuide. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So you have a mix of PM, engineers, engineering managers, designers, a bit of mix. So let's get going, and maybe Nick, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into product development, a little bit of your background story.
Is it me freezing or?
Yeah, now we have you back. Go.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that. All right. Where do I start from? Okay, so let me be the present. So I'm again, my name is Niccolò. Happy to meet you all. I'm the director of engineering in GetYourGuide for the Traveler group. What does it mean? It means that my team supervise the customer experience, the search and discovery customer experience. So most of the landing pages, the search result page, and the page of a single activity in GetYourGuide. If you're familiar with the product, we basically are a marketplace where we sell experiences, travel experiences. So from the museum tickets to the bungee jumping to visiting the Colosseum, you name it, like all over the world. So what do we do with our teams? We try and then provide the best customer experience so that our customers understand the destination where they want to go, and then they find the right activities for them, and then they finally add it to the cart, or they check availability, because then what happens after, so checkout and then purchasing, is actually another group, is the fintech group, and that's outside of my scope. Apart from that, I also supervise 3 platform teams. I'm pretty sure I have questions about the structure of my group, more on that later probably. Yeah, and those are teams that are actually creating leverage for other teams to do their work faster with better quality, etc., etc. I joined GetYourGuide 3.5 years ago. Before that, I was VP of engineering at a smaller startup here in Berlin called Careship. It was a matchmaking marketplace where elder people could find caregivers for them. I was there for 1.5 years, and before that, I was in Rocket Internet, which was this huge company builder. They created Zalando, for example, and invested in Delivery Hero, so like big names in the European startup ecosystem. And I was still, once again, managing as a director of engineering their marketplace solution. So you can think about the project as a white label solution for any commerce. You basically plug it in your e-commerce, and you have a marketplace. You are not just a retailer e-commerce anymore. You can actually onboard third-party sellers into your ecosystem. And before that, I was in my Puglia, where I come from, having my own startup as a founder. It was a travel startup, so things come around sometimes. Yeah, that's pretty much about me. I'm married here in Berlin with a son, living in Berlin since 9.5 years. Yeah, again, happy to meet you all.
Cool, awesome. So you told us a little bit about your story, right? So you worked in Italy, you work at Rocket, which is again, as Nicolò said, if you don't know, is like the company that really made the tech scene in Berlin. So the tech scene in Berlin almost exists only because of Rocket Internet and their model of bootstrapping and launching and scaling startup to unicorns, many of them. And then you did GetYourGuide. So how did you find different companies or different sizes of different scope as well? Because I GetYourGuide, you do product. At Rocket Internet, you were doing platform before you were doing startup. What do you see as working the same or differently in different phases and different sizes?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very broad question. Let's start from the similarities, which are not a lot, but it's yeah, on the same at the same time, it's always the same but different. So I think one recurring theme in startups, in bigger companies, in let's say software as a service company, I refer to Rocket Internet, it's picking the next thing that adds the most business value. And that's always the most difficult trade-off in every part of the lifetime of a company. It's valid for Early stage startup, it's valid for a Series A. Startup, it's valid for a Series E. Scale up is probably also valid for enterprise, but that's a constant for sure. Of course, the price of getting it wrong in a startup is way higher than getting it wrong in a bigger scale company. But this is a skill basically that I had to learn, and I think it's super valuable for engineers or for everyone that works in tech. So just to give a little bit of more details on this, figuring out not only what's the best opportunity to work on in terms of business, but also what adds the best leverage, what's the best long-term investment. All of that is a skill that I had to have basically in all my jobs. What's different is definitely the pace, the focus, and also the scrappiness. Of course, in a startup, if you're just starting a business or like building, not starting a business, like start building a product to find market fit, to prove that you have a customer, then of course you want to be as scrappy as possible. It's not that you don't care about quality, but you still need to have like a basic hygiene level. But that matters more than just having the best quality ever that you can put in front of the customer. While, of course, in later stage startups and in scale-ups and in more mature companies, you definitely care more about quality and consistency, and you start thinking about your customers, not in terms of just a generic customer anymore, but you also, of course, need to start to distinguish, okay, we have different kind of customers, how can we optimize the customer experience for all of them? So it's a more nuanced job, if you want.
And how do you find about, so as you mature and you get older as a startup, sometimes you tend to focus more about perfection than being scrappy, right? And then you kind of lose the agility and like, how do you stay agile and nimble and scrappy when you need to maybe on start, even scale ups have startup projects, right? So you have experimental projects. How do you manage innovation and experimentation with business as usual?
Yeah, I think what's helping, for example, what's helping us in GetYourGuide in keeping this, let's say, principle of, okay, being lean and being fast is having a portfolio approach. So whenever we plan our yearly roadmap, we're planning a yearly roadmap is kind of difficult. That's more on the strategy side. But for example, when we decide, okay, what do we do in the next quarter, we always divide things to do in different buckets. And for example, we have seeds, where we do not expect any, for example, any business KPI uplift. And there we can be more daring, we can experiment, we can go scrappier, for example, just to get the early signals from the experiments that we are doing. And then you have actually opportunistic experiments, so things that you are trying to have a business KPI impact, for example. And also there you can be scrappy in the first iteration, for example. So you want to try to move things around, to add some messaging, for example, and that you can still do it by being scrappy, by adding some technical depth. And then when you see that things are working, when you see that customers are responding positively, then you can go back and rebuild things a little bit more nicer or add more quality. So basically solidify the uptime that you tried out in the first place. The mistake in this case would be to plan a whole work stream up front, and then figure out all the edge cases, and then have commitment from all stakeholders, which will take you probably 1 month, 2 months before you even start the first iteration. That's what we tend to not to do. I can give a couple of examples. At some point, like a few months ago, we wanted to add some messaging around activities where we said, okay, best price guarantee. Now, this kind of claim, best price guarantee, as you may have seen on booking.com, for example, comes with a little bit of legal implication, right? So the first instinct of one of my teams was, okay, now we need to consult legal. And then they went, and of course, the legal did their job saying, no, you cannot do this. That's the standard answer from legal. So they panic. They say, okay, what do we do now? And my suggestion was, guys, just go and do it. Like, if this means we are going to learn from it, 7 days, 14 days, this is the usual average lifetime of an experiment. No one is going to complain, no one is going to cry, customers are not going to sue us, so please do it. So this is the kind of mindset you want to have. And when I talk about scrappiness, it's not just scrappiness in the execution, it's also scrappiness in the mindset. So just do it, get shit done, and then we deal with the aftermath. Of course, it takes a bit of experience to evaluate the aftermath. There's a certain, let's say, red line that you cannot cross. But in general, this is the kind of mindset that you want to maintain even when you grow up with your company.
Cool, awesome, thank you. In terms of team structures, kind of how many product development team do you have, and what is your philosophy for organizing them, right? So you talked about platform team, you talk about product team.
Yeah. So currently my group, it's a relatively large group. We have 4 mission teams, or product teams as you call them, and 3 platform teams. And I mean, that's my assumption, that product teams in a Widow is basically mission team. GetYourGuide,
Yeah.
just to make sure, it's a team that has an engineering manager, a product manager, a designer at least, and then of course engineers, and then you may have I don't know, a data analyst or a UX. How do they call it nowadays? The writers, basically, whatever.
The writers.
The content design. The content is no, they don't.
Content
Don't
designers.
call, yeah, don't call them writers because they will get upset. So content design. Cool. Anyway, so whatever it means to the team to own things end to end, and then you have again platform teams. Those are purely engineering teams, so only engineers with an engineering managers. And what do? They basically take care about the foundations, the governance, and the SDKs, and basically everything which is horizontal to other teams, which means that the stakeholders of these platform teams are actually other teams. It's not like they are not in the front row. They are not talking directly to the customers. They do job for other teams. So that's how we structure things generically in GetYourGuide. Works pretty well because then they can definitely focus on their mission. Every team has a mission. Every team has a piece of ownership. When you talk about, of course, product teams. And yeah, one of the principles is definitely owning things end to end. So we don't have any front end team, we don't have any back end team. In every team, there are enough skills to basically deliver a use case from the downstream services to the clients.
What do the 3 platform team own? Can you give us a practical example?
Yes. Yeah, so we have one team called Search Platform. So very tautologically speaking, they are owning our search capabilities, which means they basically offer a generic set of APIs where you can query both catalog and pricing and availability. So you can get any information about our activities. Not only, we have something called trip items, which is something that you want to do in a destination. For example, the Eiffel Tower in Paris, it's a trip item. So we can also query and filter. And this is what Search Platform do. So they are detached from any specific use case, customer use case. They simply serve these APIs, and this is what other teams are using. And they focus on the performance of the API, they focus on the infrastructure, they focus on indexing, and that's their job. Then we have 2 other platform teams that I call the sister teams, because one is called Traveler Platform and another is called Traveler Platform Native Apps. They are basically the same team split in 2 because it's just many people. And one is focused on web and backend, and the other is focused on native apps. That's the only exception to where you have teams focused on specific part of the stack for a reason, because native apps is quite peculiar in what they do. They are also doing, for example, they are doing CI/CD. They take care about the CI/CD infrastructure for the release train of both apps. And then both teams are working on, for example, design systems. So engineering the design system components, it's up to TP and TP&A. Recently, we developed a technology called server-driven UI. Those are the teams that now supervise the foundation of this technology. Maybe on that a bit later. I saw a question that actually fits this topic very well. Yeah, so this is what the platform team does.
Cool, awesome. And then how do you guarantee the consistency of UI, UX engineering practices across teams? So I guess this platform team play a big part, but is that the only mechanism or?
No, it's not. I mean, a lot of it comes from design and product, of course. It's well, let's start from a fact. It's a complicated matter, right? Because every team tends to optimize for their specific vertical, and it may be one page, it may be like a horizontal kind of experience, but they tend to optimize for what works best for them. And this is sometimes conflicting with consistency. Typically, because like one team wants to optimize a specific component for their use cases, and another team is actually of another opinion. So how do you, and like if this is not complicated enough, then of course, if you have multiple clients, you're going to get inconsistent across.
We lost him again, no?
Yeah.
Hey, I'm back.
Now you're back.
Yes.
You need
Okay,
a new
cool.
Wi-Fi. I get your guide. I'll message Johannes to spend some of the money on it.
I don't know why. I don't know why. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, what I was about to say, yeah.
We lost him again.
He has the same problem that I have. In Puglia, we have the same problem.
Oh my God. I'm tempted to switch to my say mobile network. Let's see.
Yeah, I did the same before.
Let's see. Okay, if it happens once more, then I will switch to my mobile network. Anyway, so we need to think about the clients because, for example, we implement something on web, but like iOS and Android, if you have like all three clients, then they start to get not on par. So how do you catch up? How do you make sure that components are consistent and user experience is consistent across clients? So it's definitely a problem. You have a technical side of the solution and also like cultural side of the solution. You need to have like people responsible for the consistency. For example, in GetYourGuide, we usually have KRs in the OKR framework. We have KRs about product quality, and we allocate capacity in every single team to take care about product quality. So we actually measure that. And then you can have, systems around that. For example, the design system is one of the way to ensure that we have UI consistency and somehow user experience consistency. You have, well, actually me and then my director of product and director of UX that actually also supervise that everything is more or less consistent. And then you may have solutions on the engineering side of things. For example, I was mentioning we came up with this technology called server-driven UI, where we moved all the logic for our search and discovery funnel on the back end. So now web, iOS, and Android clients, they are basically blank canvases that query the backend, and they get the page layout, the component that needs to be rendered, and the data. And the responsibility of the clients is just rendering things. So whenever I change something in the backend, I basically do that across the three clients at the same time. And so this is how I achieve also some kind of consistency. So there's no silver bullet there. It needs to be addressed both from the organizational side of things, but also the technical side of things. There's a lot of things that we can do.
Cool. I'm still waiting for the blog post you promised me about this topic.
I know. Yes.
What about more? Okay, so Daniel is saying that they did something similar Everly, so Supermercato 24. What about consistency in the architecture? Like engineering architecture of the platform, how you do events, tracking, services, APIs.
Yeah, this comes with scale. So you don't have that problem until you have it. until you notice it at least, that too many teams are doing things differently, and at some point you have champions or people that actually see the problem, and hopefully they have the mindset to go and try to change things. Sometimes the decision is top bottom because we can clearly see the value of this kind of initiatives. But in general, you can have organizational solutions around this kind of consistency standards. One that comes to my mind is having guilds around different technologies. For example, you have the Java guild in GetYourGuide, you have the architecture guild. The architecture guild is exactly that place where people discuss new services, changes to different services, or the way services communicate, the way we do tracking. And there are initiatives that starts from those conversations that actually end up in, okay, this is the standard way of doing things. This is how we track. This is how we bootstrap a new service. This is how we maintain our dependencies, you name it, basically. Every single process around changing the architecture or changing technology usually starts from this kind of conversation. What did I want to say more? Well, I forgot.
Awesome. And my next question is, how do you handle large projects that span multiple teams? So I suppose to implement this server-side layout, you have to involve like platform team and front-end team, and
so
align a number of teams and people. So how do you kind of manage it?
Yeah, that was no doubt the most complex project that I managed so far. It involved, yes, 7 teams, basically. And the difficulties were like manifold. Imagine you have to stop experimenting for 3 to 6 months all over the real estate of your ownership, because then people need to build this technology and then convert all the components and then catch up before you can actually start re-experiment, so diverging again from the status quo. So we had to freeze the status quo and run as fast as possible. So how do you do that? First, so lessons that I learned and things that we actually applied and we saw that works. I was kind of paranoid, and I'm not overstating that, about the communication across teams. So every day we had team representatives checking in and telling other people. It was basically a stand-up, if you want, but across different teams. This was already like lubricating the conversations and the communication across teams. Then it was me as an executive sponsor. So if there was a blocker in terms of capacity or dependencies on other teams that didn't want to, collaborate because they had their own agenda, so I was going there and adding my leverage, let's say. And then we appointed like one person as the single point of contact of the project. So that this person was the, let's say, the trinity of the projects, that everything was passing through them. This person was responsible from connecting the teams to updating the huge spreadsheet of the project, updating stakeholders. So we had a strong sense of ownership on one single person. Of course, this person was not doing everything, but he was making sure that everyone was doing their part. This worked, but we had one strong condition, and the strong condition was that there was a very, very strong alignment on the, let's say, on the leaders of the company. So everyone had bought into the project, from the CEO to the CTO to the CPO and to the directors that were leading the project. So having this strong alignment made the project possible. So don't think you can do these kind of things bottom up, because it never works. You always hit some obstacle around on the road. What else? Those are the main lessons that I learned.
Anyone from our side has any more questions related to this topic, or any nuance that they want to ask? Because after this, we're moving to the engineering section of the Q&A. So, or maybe more questions generally around team organization and.
Yeah,
Kokas.
I'm going to ask one. What was the level of knowledge in the single teams on the technical part? So you said everybody was checking in, but then of course there's a lot of details, I imagine, in every single team. So the person that was, trying to manage the overall project, at what level did it stop, or did you have another solution to actually check what was happening technically inside, and everything was working fine and as expected?
Yeah, well, let's say like this, from the technical point of view, there was a task force which was doing most of the job, or the foundational work of the project, and then the point of contacts from each product team, they were useful because they were then taking the foundational solution, and they were using that to migrate their own pages. From the communication point of view, there was this central place, but I was also making sure to let's say to check in with the engineering manager of those teams, or directly with the engineer. So you had multiple point of contacts that to ensure that nothing was blocked. Did I answer your question?
Maybe the question was more, if I can rephrase it, like the person managing this whole project across the 7 people, to what level of detail was that person going? Was he just making sure that things were getting done, or was he actually going a level deeper to triple check that everything was getting done in the right way?
No, he wasn't controlling. He wasn't checking like every single pull request, or checking that like we had the right let's say application of the tool, let's say. But what we did, when we started like implementing this technology in the mission teams, we were offering a certain capacity of the foundational team or task force team for support. So you always had engineers from the teams that built the technology consulting the teams that wanted to adopt the technology. So I wouldn't use, let's say, controller checking as the word here. It's more of a, okay, I'm here if you want my help, or like my help on how to build things based on technology. Just let me know. On top of that, it's useful to see that this person was not just the project manager. Like this was also like one of the engineers that actually wrote a lot of the code of the technology. So this person was like deep into the implementation as well.
Clear. Thanks.
Anyone else on team organization, project management? No? Good. Let's move to the engineering part. So while I was there, we did the big move from PHP to Java, right? So I suppose you still have a PHP, Java, you have native iOS, native Android, still Vue probably on the front end.
Vue 3, yes.
How do you handle all these different technology and skills? How do you have cross-functional team with enough redundancy so that when someone is on holiday, the team can still move in? Like, how do you manage all these different technologies, and how much progress have you made in consolidating, if you made any?
Yeah, in the last year and a half, I would say, we pushed a lot, or let's say we encouraged a lot the engineers. No, that's the right word, because they actually wanted to do this, but we encouraged people to become polyglot, basically. If someone was an iOS engineer, they would be happy to also do Android code, or Java code, for example, or Node.js. And at some point, this became, and the same for example, like front-end engineers, they were getting more into details of the backend. For a reason, we noticed at some point that people were being blocked by the fact that, I will give an example. So as a front-end engineer, I was designing my UI, and then I was waiting for a backend engineer to implement one more attribute in a response coming from a Java service. To me, it didn't make sense. So what I was pushing the front-end engineers to learn a little bit of Java or Node.js, add the response by themselves, and then unblock themselves. This was the goal. We saw the potential productivity uplift that this could have brought. And when we saw that this was actually working, we just scaled it. At some point, we said, okay, now what we do, we expect people to be generalists. Of course, we had a transition. We started hiring generalists. The state of the art today is that GetYourGuide, you don't find back-end engineers, you don't find front-end engineers, you find generalists. And of course, we don't expect everyone to be super proficient on front-end as much as on the back-end, or the vice versa. There are always some preferences, but usually everyone is able to go back and forth. And if you are a mobile engineer, so iOS and Android, the same. They can go either cross-platform with iOS or Android, or they can go down the stack. It works pretty well for us. Of course, it needs some time for the engineers. It needed some time to adapt and to learn. But it's a very good growth opportunity, because from knowing one single language and ecosystem, you get to know more of that. You have the knowledge into the company, so it doesn't take too much. You just pair with the senior engineer in your team, and at some point you have double the knowledge you had 3 months ago, for example. So we just saw it as a big win. And then you also solve a lot of the bus factor problem, because if you don't have one engineer, which is generalist, you definitely have at least 1 or 2 more engineers that can do basically the same job.
Awesome, thank you. Regarding the mobile app, so when we joined, there were already native apps. Have you had any recent discussion on maybe moving to React Native or Flutter and go cross-platform, or is that something that is not being discussed for specific reasons?
So React Native and Flutter, I think it's out of discussion, because I mean, at least on the if I ask my engineers continuously, and they may be biased, but still, we think that Flutter, the React Native, those frameworks, they just don't scale for our sites and for the kind of quality we want to have platform by platform. We are having conversation, but it's not just internally in GetYourGuide. I think this is the consensus in the industry, that at some point Flutter and React Native, they're really good to start to build knowledge about how to build the product on the native side. At some point, especially if you have a lot of iOS and Android engineers, you may want to go native. Now, when it comes to other technologies like, I don't know, Kotlin multi-platform, we tried that in GetYourGuide. I'm not a big fan of it, at least at the current stage, because, for example, yes, you code in Kotlin and then it translates to Objective-C, which is not ideal for iOS engineers, for sure. And then we have concerns about performance on iOS side, understandability of the code. And anyway, I mean, now that we have a server-driven UI, is a way more flexible technology than because we still have web to cover, than having Kotlin multi-platform. So right now we stay native, and then we just move whatever we can to the backend.
So to summarize, you would consider such technologies for maybe a new startup, new scale-up, or new project, but totally. Definitely once you're native, you wouldn't go back.
Yeah, exactly. It also depends on the product that you're selling, but it's a general industry consensus that yes, at above some threshold of like size of the company, size of the team, you just want to go native.
Cool. Awesome. Let's talk about dependencies and libraries you might depend on. Let me see. Danilo was asking, have you recently switched from React Native to native? Yeah. Cool. So dependencies, how do you deal with maybe third-party dependencies or open source stuff that then get deprecated and abandoned? Like, how do you make space for migrating, catching up? Like, do you take ownership of? Has it ever happened that you took over ownership of library that got abandoned and took the development in-house? Or like, what is the approach?
I think it happened only once with Drone or something like that, but there was already a fork. The tendency for us as a tech company is always to go third party if there's something, there's someone that already built whatever we need. unless it's something super strategic. For example, our AB, our experimentation framework, that's something that we built ourselves. But yeah, if something gets discontinued, then you have two opinions. You have two options. One, okay, you fork it and then you take it on your side, but that takes. It also depends on the size of the library or like piece of technology, but it usually takes. I mean, if someone took the effort to build it, it's because it's large enough that a lot of people use it, and it's large enough so that it's expensive to build it now. So that already tells you that it's probably good to look for an alternative. Yes, you can bridge it by fork it and maintain it, but it's usually not worth it unless you need a very high degree of customization. Third party is the way.
Cool. Awesome. Now we're going to move more into maybe infrastructure. I don't know. It's not really your area, but I'm sure
okay.
you can share
I can answer.
So how do you monitor the infrastructure? So the application and the infrastructure below, and who is responsible for it? How does it work? What is in the product team versus what is in the DevOps team? Kind of share responsibility.
So the application level is easy actually, because everything that belongs to the application level is actually responsibility of the product teams. So they have a DevOps component there, and they are responsible for monitoring everything which is in their domain. So
they have a DevOps person in the team, or they have DevOps responsibility?
No, they have DevOps responsibility. So this is how it works. We have an infrastructure team, which is basically another platform team, but from it's a whole group actually. They have platform teams to empower product teams to do this job easily. So we have like a shitload of metrics attached to the services, to the infrastructure, to our Kubernetes cluster, to the pods. It's super easy to launch new services, and everything is already like tracked from CPU, memory. So from let's say machine bound metrics to the possibility of measuring application level things. So for example, request and response. The ultimate responsibility is still on the product teams. So for example, we use Datadog, where we send every single metric, and then we can see everything there. We track the performance of the services. We track the performance of the APIs. We track the performance of the front end application, and that's the responsibility of the product teams to track it, to improve the tracking, to improve the performance, and to keep everything in a healthy state. What the infrastructure team does is to just facilitate this kind of operation. So they provide you the tools, they provide you the automations, they provide you the standards, they provide you consulting, but they don't tell you exactly what to measure, how to measure. That's your responsibility, and yeah, every team is responsible for that. Engineering managers, in particular, they are responsible for the system health of the services and the technology owned by the teams. They are like we have a piece in the calibration and the review cycle, performance cycle, that says, okay, system health, how the team is doing on that, and that's what we use to grade basically engineering managers. One of the things.
What is the size of an engineering team? So how many engineers in an average team?
Yeah, I think right now the standard size is 5 generalists, 2 native apps engineers, and yeah, and then every other basic component, so EM, PM, and so on and so forth.
Okay. Cool. There is a question on how to avoid accumulating technical debts. Like how do you make space for keeping up with things?
It feels like an interview question.
Yeah. You are hired.
Well, let's where do we start? So we need context, right? We need to put everything in context. What's the business need of the team? What's the impact that you are trying to achieve? Is there any urgency around it? So those are all questions that that dictates basically how much tech debt we can pay back, how urgent is to pay it back, or what's the balance that we strike between building the next feature versus repaying tech debt? Do we need to build a component in every single sprint, for example, if we use sprints for repaying tech debt? Can we go 1 month without thinking about quality? So there are a lot of questions around this topic and a lot of philosophies. My usual way of doing things is that you want to top up the skills of the engineers in order to reduce the tech debt, the bad tech debt that you do. But when I say bad tech debt, it means like code which cannot be tested and needs to be refactored, poorly written code design and architecture, this kind of stuff. So that thing you want to minimize at the source by upskilling your engineers. When it comes to conscious tech debt that we take to basically learn something faster and reduce the time to market, then of course this can be managed, and you can actually decide the trade-off. Okay, do I ship this thing now? Do I want to learn faster, or can I afford to go dark a little bit longer in order to make things properly? Does it even make sense? It's also a conversation between the engineers and the product manager in this case, right? Because it really depends on the urgency of the delivery and the impact you have on the business. So it's a complicated topic. There's no one single answer. My recommendation would be, yes, upskill the engineers, because this will reduce the problem a lot, and then still keep a healthy amount of small one, but healthy, of time capacity in your team for addressing technical debt, and keep refactoring, adding tests, the usual drill. But sometimes we forget about that and how important it is, especially when it compounds over time.
So I suppose this goes back to your answer before of the portfolio approach, right? So in business as usual, innovation, seeds, and tech debt. So I think you need to balance it in the quarter as a depending on the requirements, basically. Okay. On around internal documentation for APIs, for mainly API technical documentation. So I remember before I left, we were looking into Backstage to kind of put something together. Is that how you're doing it? Are you doing it?
Yeah, no, I don't think you're using Backstage. So when it comes to documentation, well, it depends. So two types of documentation in this case when it comes to API. One is basically the specs. I think we need to go even basic, because when a company starts building APIs and having different teams building APIs, so there's not the immediate assumptions that I will publish basically my APIs in a specific way with some standards. So just to give an example, these days we are closing the adoption of OpenAPI specs. So every API now in GetYourGuide is covered by OpenAPI specs. We are monitoring the request violations. We are monitoring the response violations. So, and this is already like helping a lot, because you know that when you go to the published API documentation of a specific team, you have the guarantee that that's exactly the API that you're going to face, that you're going to work on, and that's already half of the documentation, right? The remaining part of the documentation, well, it depends. We don't really build a lot of documentation around the API. The API should be quite meaningful already, and if they are not, there's a problem in the clarity of the API, in my opinion. I think what we should build documentation on, and what we do, is about larger projects. For example, the design system, that really requires a lot of documentation, examples, how you use a component, when do you use a component, when you don't use a component, examples, how you integrate it. So in those kind of projects, you actually need wiki-style documentations. For APIs, I don't think we see the need, apart from having the structure of the API well documented and very tied to the code base. Hope I answered the question.
Good, perfect. And what about like north to south communication, so API gateways, or like synchronous communication versus asynchronous communication, right? So how do you deal with what to do synchronously through APIs or through API gateway from application to platform? and how, like, when do you use synchronous, asynchronous patterns, and where do you keep the documentation of both? So how do you document the messages, and who is producing and reading them, and API is the same?
That's basically the same. Like async messaging is another form of API at the end of the day. So whatever goes into a topic needs to have a specific shape, and that shape is the API basically. So every message, every message type is documented by the team that's responsible for that specific. When I say topic, it's because I'm thinking about Kafka topic in this case. Yeah, so it's basically the same. Every team, which is the producer of or the owner of a specific Kafka topic, so they see the messages that pass through. There are some exceptions, of course. I mean, there's marketing platform which basically ingests every single message that come through. But if you are producing a message, so if you're responsible for the specific message, you also need to provide the format, and that's just another API.
Cas, did that answer the question, or do you have more on this?
Yeah, sure. I have another question, which is how do you keep, in case of changes or big project changes, aligned on all the dependent projects, like all the front ends or mobile apps? In that case, how do you handle it?
Yeah, it's not simple, right? I mean, we try to be backward compatible when we can. We had problems in the past. Nowadays, it's actually getting better. Where, someone that works on the back end tend to forget that applications, like you have multiple application versions that users are actually using, and it's not like web that you push and then everyone is in the same version. So you need to be aware that you need to be backward compatible, and then you need to evolve your APIs in a specific way. So it's never simple. It's a mini project management task that you have to do. Go and talk to other teams and figuring out altogether when to deprecate versions, for example, when we can kill some versions of the native applications. Yeah, no, sorry, no simple answer. You need to make effort in making that happen.
You need to do the work. There is no magic. Last couple of questions. So one in architecture and geographical distribution, right? So GetYourGuide is a global company. You have customers from all over the world. Are you mainly hosted in Europe, or are you multi-region? And
we are not multi-region so far. We are in Frankfurt. We are hosted in AWS Frankfurt mostly. Definitely, we know that there's a correlation between the performance of the clients or the response in general and the conversion rate. So there might be gains that we are not reaping in other parts of the world. For example, in the US, the latency is definitely more than in Europe or in New Zealand. So far, we didn't see the justification for going multi-region. Multi-region usually, I mean, the costs explode and the complexity of the replication explodes as well. So you need to have a super, super strong reason to be at the edge also with your infrastructure. We do some edging stuff. So we serve some assets on the edge, but that doesn't, it's not like multi-region stuff. We don't do that.
Go, Robbie.
Yeah, I would like to ask if the database are in Frankfurt. Usually the cloud provider, I don't know if you use RDS for AWS or any other services.
It's RDS, yes.
Okay. Sometimes they have maintenance period, okay, because they require to do, I don't know, like security updates or this kind of stuff. And this can work well if all your traffic here is, for example, in Europe, you have the database in Europe. You can schedule it in the night where you don't have traffic or very low traffic. But when you have a global application, of course, the time zone is different. So it may be night in Europe, but it's still afternoon in America. So how do you manage this kind of, also not only the maintenance that the cloud provider does, but also maybe when you have to do some maintenance that require the platform to be offline or unreachable.
So I don't recall any let's say instance in years where we had to completely shut down the database because of maintenance. So on our side, that somehow worked. I cannot give you the details because I just don't have them. But I mean, I would notice if our application would be
You're
down.
gonna be called out at night because your application was down.
If our application was down because of a database maintenance. On AWS side, again, I don't have the details, but this wasn't a problem for months now.
I can answer this one. So usually when you set up RDS in AWS, you can do deployments where you have like 3 databases fully replicated in 3 different data centers. And AWS takes care of the rolling update of them, changing the master automatically so that you basically never have downtime. So downtime for service from AWS, you are almost guaranteed to never have it. I think it's more of a question if you need to run some queries to basically change completely the structure of the database, but then you probably do it on a replica and then flip over the master. But yeah. Good. Last one. So data. What is the tech stack for data? I know you don't own the team that owns the data platform, but as a consumer, maybe you can tell us something on what is given to you by the data team.
Okay, this is a very difficult question. I think I can answer it offline, just to give justice to the question, because otherwise I will just say, I will just throw some buzzwords, but nothing very concrete.
Awesome, perfect. Any other question from anyone? We have a couple of minutes. Nope. That's it. Thank you very much, Niccolò, for spending this time with us.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Niccolò.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Ciao. Thank you.
Ciao.
Cheers.
Ciao.
Bye.